Okay, so after you have created your layers, plane, box, box 2, sphere, and cone, in the top view, build each one of those objects on each one of those layers. Okay, so make a plane and a box. Okay, is everyone with me? Okay. First, we'll start looking at material application. And Elliot's going to kind of move through this workflow in a very different way. But I'm going to talk about the material editor a little bit. So if you go up here to V-Ray, the V-Ray toolbar should have been installed in your toolbars up here, your drop-down menus. And there are several different options here underneath the V-Ray toolbar. You can go to the options menu, which is kind of adjusting your render output size, your camera position and output, your environment, and then kind of like lighting qualities. And then we have the material editor, which is here. And then we have show VFB, which is kind of the preview of what it is that you're rendering. So if you rendered something and then you close it up, you can always open it back up if you forgot to save it or you just want to check it out. That's the VFB. And then there's a Rhino materials area, and that's kind of for making very basic, just kind of solid color with like basic transparency reflection qualities. But let's first go into V-Ray Material Editor. And there are three parts to this material editor. There's the materials list, so this kind of lists all the different materials you're using in your scene. There's the preview area here, so if you click on one of your materials that you've created, oh, I'm frozen, yikes, yikes. Oh no. Okay, there we go. Huh, Rhino. Okay, so we can click on any one of these materials and the preview will update. Oh, sorry, yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. So if you go under material list, so if I click on, right now you're clicked on scene materials, is that, and this is what your interface looks like, is that right? Okay. So if you right click, you can create a material and pull down to V-Ray material. That's typically what I choose. But you can also choose a two-sided material. It looks like there's a SketchUp option, SketchUp material, and then a wrapper material. Okay, so once you create a scene material, so let's create materials that correspond to each one of our objects that we just created. So we'll create a material called plane, box, box 2, sphere, and cone. Okay? Huh. And the way that you can rename your material is by right-clicking on the material name and renaming it there. So we'll call this plane. Box. I don't know why these are showing as a sublist of the box material. Okay, so note that these materials that we haven't yet assigned have this as their preview. So the way that you can adjust many different qualities of your material, and those are listed over here in these menus. There's basic parameters. Let's see. BDRF options, maps. So if we go into box 2, preview it, we have a gray, just kind of default material. Let's go into basic parameters. And let's just do a very basic material edit. Okay, so we're going to go into diffuse. This is where you change the color of your material. And let's preview it there. So then there's reflection and refraction. Who can tell me the difference between reflection and refraction? Think back to physics 101. How does light work? What does that mean? Yes. Yeah, so if you think about a glass of water with a straw in it, and you see how the straw kind of distorts and is disjointed. That's refraction, okay? So refraction is important, but it's not as much something that we are noticing, at least as much as reflection. So I typically just leave refraction as is, as its default. But reflection you can change, as well as transparency. So let's change reflection, and we can change our reflection to yellow. So we're getting a little bit of a yellow, and it becomes much glossier then also, right? And then you can change the kind of degree of reflectivity also. Or the reflective glossiness, if it's too glossy or not glossy enough. Okay? And then we have translucency. This actually is new to this version of V-Ray, so I can't speak to it. But I imagine translucency is a degree of transparency, which is typically determined by shade of gray. So if it's black, it's very opaque, and if it's white, it's transparent. So if it's a shade of gray in between those, it becomes that transparent or translucent. Okay. So these are basic parameters. And generally, other than basic parameters and maps, if I'm creating my own material, these are the only two things that I adjust. So if I'm in maps, what are maps? You've heard that a little bit. What about background bitmap? We inserted a background bitmap. What's a map when it comes to rendering? Yeah. Oh, not a hand for me. Yes. Yes, very good. So we could take a 2D photograph or texture or material and map it to a surface. And then there are different options within that map for how many times it's repeated, whether or not it's mirrored, whether or not that seam is blurred. But we're just going to leave this box 2 material very simple. So we have a green material with a yellow reflection. Okay, so let's go to cone. And then this one, let's apply a map. Okay. We're gonna try a map and also looks like there's no more emissivity in this version either. Yeah, interesting. Okay. So we're going to go into diffuse, and then right next to diffuse, there's this little lowercase m button. If you click on that, then Rhino takes a moment to think. It brings you into the texture editor, okay? So V-Ray kind of has many layers of information and areas to input information. And we're going to scroll down to texture bitmap. And then it's asking us to open a bitmap file. Bitmap is this word that you will hear again and again as you get into this world. And I'm going to apply, you can apply any image file that you might have on your desktop, but I'm going to apply a concrete material. And when you're looking for materials online to use as bitmaps in your renderings, you want to look for seamless or tileable material, okay? And then you can find, and if you Google search that, you'll find seamless tileable concrete, seamless tileable walnut wood flooring, seamless tileable plywood. There are many different kind of options online. Some of them have watermarks, so you want to steer clear of those. But there's really like a wealth of resources out there. So I'm going to preview my texture bitmap. And I can then change a number of options here. I'm afraid these are a little bit different from my version also. Yeah. So it looks like this kind of changes the contrast of the image. And this kind of blurs some of the inconsistencies within the image. So if you have maybe a strong seam that you're trying to get rid of, if it's not a tileable image, you want to start to use a filter blur. So we're going to say OK to that. And notice how once I've applied a bitmap, or I've entered some data into that field, the M turns from lowercase to uppercase. So if you're ever forgetting that you put a photo into a material, or you don't really know what's going on with that material, that uppercase M is cueing you into the fact that there's something going on there, okay? So now we can preview our material, and you can see there's a texture there, okay? But that's not good enough for me. It's just going to look like this strange, like, hard surface photograph, rather than I want like a concrete textured cone. Okay, so something that helps give texture to different objects is going back to the map option here. So if you see the map tab, you can open up texture bitmap, and I encourage you to kind of explore all of these different options. The bitmap is what I've used throughout my kind of rendering life. But yeah, give all of these a shot and see what you get. So texture bitmap, we're going to apply the same texture. And again, we're given these options to adjust our texture. But let's just see, without adjustment, let's just see what we've got. So we're going to preview it. And you can't see it as well here, but it does have kind of more of a texture. So we're going to apply it to our image and see what we get. We can always go back and tile it, or apply more versions of it to wrap our cone if like the grain is too big or it's not quite working in the way that we want it to. So that's another thing that you'll learn about rendering, is that it's a lot of kind of repetition, iteration. You're kind of just running a quick render and then figuring out how it looks and then changing something. It's very incremental. Anything to add to that? Yeah. So another way that we can do this, and I don't have the best library right now, but rumor has it that the grad students have started a Google Drive folder with a bunch of V-Ray materials that everyone just kind of adds to and takes from. So you should talk to some rendering grad students about getting access to that. But another way to add materials is to import a material. So if you right-click on Sphere in your material menu and pull down to Import Material, you are brought into all of the materials that you could possibly want, such as porcelain or plastic. I'm going to choose velvet myself. Mhm. But there should be some default materials that just come with V-Ray that include wax, porcelain, and flesh. Mhm. So something else that you can do is modify materials. So I just chose blue velvet, but I don't want blue velvet, and the color of velvet that I want isn't available in these express materials. So I'm just going to go in and choose magenta, and then update my velvet. Oh, might be the math that's applied here. Yeah, color 2. Let's try this. Okay, let's try this. So notice how many layers deep that was just now. Hey. Yeah. Um, so you put a material, you created a material, or you applied it to an object? Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's say pink velvet is not what I'm looking for. I can just right-click on that material again, pull down to Import Material, and choose a different material, such as, here, let's go back and see what else I have here. Masonry. I'll choose old wood. Open. Okay, there's my barn board. Okay. So let's see what we got going on. Okay. So we've created materials. How do we apply our materials? Let's go in here and we can, if we click on it's very, very faint, but there's a circle next to the layer color in the layer menu. So if we go into the plane layer and we click on the circle, the layer material menu will come up, and you can choose Assign Material by Plugin, V-Ray for Rhino. And then if you browse, it will give you a materials list. And since I'm on the plane layer, I'm going to choose plane. Okay. And there you have it. And you can see that it's loaded because you can see it here. I'm going to do the same thing with box. Assign material by plugin, browse, and box. Okay. Okay. Box 2. Assign material by plugin, browse, box 2. Okay. Okay. And sphere. And finally, cone. Okay, so now our materials are applied to our objects, but we don't really have a view set up yet, and that's very important. So let's get in here and start to set up a scene to really capture this beautiful design. So again, review from yesterday, we're going to right click on our perspective tab and pull down to set view, named views, and create a new scene. So save as view 1. Okay. Is everyone with me? Do we need any repeats? Is it in the V-Ray material editor? No, in Rhino? Okay. Elliot, can you, as soon as you're done here. Oh, great. Yes, that's another way of doing it. So we can select our cone and then go into the cone in the list, right click and apply material to selection or layer. When you do it on the material by layer, you have to explore the layer carefully. I tend, when I'm rendering a file, I create a separate file just for rendering and kind of organize my layers according to how it is I want it to be rendered. Elliot can help you. Other questions? Is everyone, can I keep going? Okay. Great. So let's run a test render, see what's going on. It's looking pretty black. What was that? I just hit this little R for render in the V-Ray toolbar. You can also type render. This is, well, I have my, so your current renderer needs to be set to V-Ray for Rhino. So if you go under the render menu and pull down to current renderer and then V-Ray for Rhino, that should set you up. And then in the V-Ray toolbar, you just hit the blue circle with the R on the inside to render. Or you can type render. Okay, so here's my scene. My concrete material is working pretty well. It turns out that I might not need to tile it. And then you can see that I didn't add any material to my plane, and so it's just the default gray. The green has a little bit of reflectivity, but I can just barely see it. Actually, maybe we should tile that concrete material. It's looking, the grains are looking kind of big. Yeah, it can get tight at the top. So let's go back. We want to adjust the tiling of that map. So we're going to go into the cone layer, and then in diffuse, we'll follow that uppercase M. And then we're going to scroll down and choose to repeat the map. Let's just try 3 times and choose mirror, mirror. Okay. Let's preview it, see what we got. So you can see there's just barely, there's like a little bit of a checkered appearance to it. hopefully that doesn't trip us up too much. And then if you'll remember, we also added a bump map. So if we go down here, we want to change or coordinate the number of repetitions for the bump map. Okay. Yeah, so it just becomes a little bit thicker, or kind of has a heavier feeling. So let's render again and see what we get. Oh, very different. Oh, this is just the rendered. It's like, what? So notice that the V-Ray material is working really quite well. That might be a good route for you as you move forward to use those materials. I think most of you are working with brick-clad buildings, so you might want to experiment a little bit with the brick patterns. You also might want to experiment with brick patterns in Photoshop, or with collaging photos of the building on top of your 3D model. There are a lot of different options when it comes to rendering, almost too many. That's the VFB. So if you go under V-Ray and pull down to show VFB, view frame buffer, that's what it is, view frame buffer. It will show up. Or V-Ray frame buffer. The named views. Oh, I see. That is if you right-click on your view, pull down to set view, pull down to named views. You get it? So right-click on the view, and then pull down to set view, and then named views. And then it should look something like this. Yeah. Oh, weird. Yeah. So then you can just dock your, if you're working with a lot of views and kind of setting up scenes, you can just take that viewport and dock it on the side so that it doesn't leave. Okay? So I'm going to let's see. I'll touch on the options menu. So if we go into V-Ray, the V-Ray menu, and then pull down to options, V-Ray and then options. The O, yeah. This is where you can adjust your document size, your output. I rarely get into this. As you can see, it's very deep, a lot of different controls. And I encourage you to get into it, but I don't know if that's helpful right now for this tutorial. But you can choose whether or not you are rendering lights, or if you're rendering hidden lights, or if you're just showing GI. What does GI stand for? Yes, and what does global illumination mean? Yeah. Okay. I don't know. the way the way that I think about global illumination, and that's you're probably right. You're probably right. But the way that I think about it is just kind of a dome of light reflecting an even light source on everything in the scene. So it's kind of like being in an overcast sky. If that makes sense. So you can pull down, and then there are all of these other parameters which we're not going to get into today. Mm-hmm. Yes, unless you want to make your own customized render setting. So we'll just touch on some basics in here. Environment, we can adjust. So right now you'll notice that in my renderings the background is black, not so hot. Let's change it to white. Or we could map a background onto the back. And then you can also control your output. So right now I'm rendering at an output of 800 by 600 DPI, very small. So how do you figure out DPI? This is another good exercise. DPI, what's DPI? We touched on this the other day. Someone new that didn't answer it last time. What's DPI? Yes, awesome. So the more dots per inch, the higher resolution of your image. So what is an image that's saved on the web? What's the DPI of it? Yes, very good. And why do we want low DPI for the web? Yes, or show up. Yeah. But when we're printing, what kind of DPI are we looking for? 200, 300. So how do we figure out DPI if we're trying to make an image that is 8.5 by 11? The DPI at 200 DPI. Yeah. But what is what's our output? The width and height in DPI. $1,700 by 2,200. That sound about right? So 8.5 times 200, 1,700. 11 multiplied by 200, 2,200. Okay, so that's how you figure it out. Just multiply the DPI by the size of the image that you're trying to create, and then you'll get your desired output. Mm-hmm. 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 So when I bring this 2,200 by 1,700 image into Photoshop, it's going to be huge in terms of its physical size in Photoshop. But then you scale it down so that it's at a higher DPI. In other words, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we can save, so now that let's say that we've spent some time adjusting all of our settings, we can now save our settings in this folder, ASGVIS options. And then if okay. And then if I change my settings here, I can always go back and upload those settings that I made previously. Okay? So let's see what I got just with changing those settings. So much bigger, much more my default material turns much more reflective, it looks like. I have a gray background. Yeah, so that is under, let's see, let's go back to that. Yeah. Environment. So I changed the refraction to white. You can also map an image there. Maybe I'll change my skylight to yellow. See what happens with that. So a lot of different parameters here. So you can create kind of a very basic V-Ray material just with changing color, refraction, reflection. You can create a V-Ray material by importing a photograph and applying it as a bump map. Or you can import a V-Ray material, okay? Another really handy tool in this, let's look at one of our presets before we move on from here. Let's do exterior presets. Let's do medium quality exterior presets. And see what kind of image we get. Very similar. Exterior medium quality. And it also looks like the yellow light is still happening. Yeah. Or I might have saved that. Strange. It's pretty slow, V-Ray. Huh. Okay, well, we'll just leave that for now. So another great feature in V-Ray is that you can create an infinite plane. So rather than having this plane that we can see the edges of, let's say we just want a ground plane that extends off into the horizon, that can be created with this little button right here. Add V-Ray infinite plane. Okay, so let's get on our plane, change objects layer, and then we're going to delete that original plane. Now we have this plane that's stretches into an infinity. And although we can see the edge of it, it renders as infinite. Okay, and then we can also, another great feature of V-Ray is, and I guess it's a Rhino feature also, is that we can create a sun source. Okay, so you can either type in sunlight, the sun angle calculator, or you can hit this little sun icon in the V-Ray toolbar. Is everyone with me? Yeah? Okay. So you can hit the sun icon, and you can choose where in the world you are, what time of year it is, what time of day it is, if it's not manual control. So I'm going to turn my sun on, unclick manual control, and then I'm going to choose, oh, maybe we just choose exactly today's date and today's time. And then let's choose our place. See if it can find us. Yes, Minneapolis, Minnesota, here. And then position, I generally just type in some positive numbers. I've never noticed that changing the position of the sun really changes the scene output. So now that we have a sun, we choose exterior presets. Oh, I see. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Did that change? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'll try that. Reload default. And then I'll do exterior medium quality. Okay, let's try this render. Ooh, very different result. It's pretty bright outside right now, turns out. Questions about this so far? Yeah. Just by changing the time of day. I'm going to modify sun. So I get back to my sun. I can either double click it or I can just select lights in the scene, select sunlight, and then get back to my sun here. And I'm going to say the time of day. It's 11 p.m. And let's see what I get for this. It's not really an awesome representation of nighttime. The time of day, yeah. So in this changed time of day, I'm going to add some lights. So I'm not seeing I like to use so I'm going to add Rhino lights, and then Elliot's going to show you how to add V-Ray lights. So I'm not seeing my light toolbar right now. So in order to get my light toolbar, I'm just going to type toolbar into the command line. Toolbar. And then I'm going to find my light toolbar. Let's see, toolbars. Okay. So there they are, trusty light toolbars. Put them up here so they're not taking up quite so much space. I'll make this one smaller. Huh, maybe not. Light, so it's under default. If you type in toolbar and you go under default, then you can scroll down. You can choose any of these if you prefer working through toolbars. You can choose light tools or lights. There we go. Okay. So I want to create, lights actually make more sense within a volume. So I'm going to create a new layer with a new volume. So you select these, new layer. I'm going to call it bounding box. Go into that layer and type in bounding box. Bounding box. Okay, and then explode it. And then I'm going to just kind of zoom in and create a new scene in my bounding box. Okay. Save as interior view. And within this box, I'm going to create a light. And I'm going to create a new layer for my lights. And I chose rectangular light. And notice how the rectangular light, right now it's the size of my ceiling, which is pretty big. It might be a little heavy-handed, but we'll see how it turns out. And there's an arrow that's attached to it, and that arrow represents the direction of the light, okay? So right now it's intersecting, it's on axis with my ceiling, and that means that it might render a little funky. So let's move it down just a little bit. And then let's also check it out in terms of its properties, because this is Rhino. So the way that we modify the light is through the properties menu. Okay, so if we go into properties, the multicolored wheel that's kind of attached to the layer sidebar, we can adjust the intensity here, the color here. We can make it invisible, which I think would be preferable in this instance. And the intensity right now is 30. It's really hard to know how Rhino lights are going to be communicating with V-Ray. So we'll see how this looks, but we might need to adjust that. Let's go back to our interior view. Is everyone with me? Any repetition? Yeah, tell me. That's a good question. No, it's just, it covers that much space, but it doesn't become more intense. There's just more of it. Yeah. Other questions? Is what I've done so far make sense? Yeah? Would it be useful if I walked around at this point? Why don't we render this and see what happens? Whoa, turns out that light is super bright. So let's turn it down. Let's go over here, intensity, let's make it 1. And just see what happens with that. Okay, so 1 actually doesn't look like it's bright enough. So it's good to know that we're between 1 and 30. And so you can just kind of push and pull those parameters to see what will end up working for your scene. Yeah, so that's looking better. And note also that you don't necessarily, right now I'm rendering at 8.5 by 11, but often you don't want that kind of default paper size. Maybe you want something, maybe what's a better way to represent this is something that's longer and skinnier, right? Or kind of more wide angle. So you can adjust your kind of view settings or aspect ratio in the options menu we were before, the output tab. Okay? Any questions about this? Bounding box? Yeah. Okay. So let's go into our bounding box layer, and we're just going to select everything that we want to bind. And we're going to type bounding box. And then we want the coordinate system to be world and the output to be solids. So enter, and we get our bounding box. And then I just want to take one face of it off. So I'm going to explode it. Deselect one face, and then join the rest of it. And then I get my scene. Maybe I'll render it from this view to see what's happening. It's nighttime outside. Bright on the inside. So questions? Go ahead and hand it over to Ed. Can you show them the kind of all of these new features of this version of V-Ray, and then also the light?
So with the new version of V-Ray, you can get V-Ray Express, and so that comes with maybe 300 materials, studio floors. So I could take her lovely model that she built and put it in a studio setting and have the light kind of bounce appropriately back at whatever I'm trying to render, and then studio lighting to go along with that. These extra materials, I've installed one of them in the toolbar, and so with these you can access them from your toolbar layout, V-Ray Express, and it will show you all these different types of materials, and each one includes 10 to 30 different subsets of materials within there. Applying them is just as easy. If you select an object, click on there. Now that object is colored 2004, so this burnt orange color. And so it's a handy way to kind of just add in a bunch of materials that you don't have to make or think about. And as with the V-Ray lights, they're quite similar. So here, I'll go over here. So the sun is the same as the sun over here. You can have your rectangular light drawn in a similar fashion, 2 points, and then click on find the third point. With these rectangular lights, I don't know if Molly said what you did, but it's pointing upwards, and we didn't want to do that, so you can just flip objects. Why didn't that work, Molly? Yours worked. You can clip it. Oh, there we go. It worked that time. So that arrow dictates kind of the direction of the light that I want it, where the light I want to go. We have point lights, and that will be a point of light that radiates out in all directions. Similar set of settings here with intensity, and you can change the color. I'll show you what that does. Not much. Oh. So a 30 for the Rhino light was too bright, and so I feel like the 30 for the point light is too small unless it's being way overpowered by the sun. So I'm going to change it to 100 and see if anything changes. Not really. There we go. So maybe this is different in Rhino. That's interesting. So we're not using a V-Ray camera. We're just kind of rendering out of the viewport. So maybe a recommendation for you guys is to use the Rhino lights. No, actually. Yeah. Okay. Oh, it's just the viewport. Okay, so it's not like a camera. Okay. Did you try any of them? Did they work? Okay. So I just did a fisheye camera. That works. Okay. So, what else do you guys want? Anything specific? So you're getting noise. Have you been? What have you done to your settings? Okay. And with noise, I mean, it could be 100 things, including the noise setting. And that would be maybe no, noise is usually a texture, a material setting that you add to it. So, do you have any questions? Yeah. So it goes faster? No. V-Ray is hardware dependent, and it only goes faster with better hardware. And it's the CPU. How we have this set up is it's rendering in the CPU. So i7 quad core, you're going to be getting 8 buckets of rendering speed, essentially. And the slower your CPU, the slower your rendering will go. And you can do real-time rendering with V-Ray RT, and that's dependent on your graphics card. And so obviously the faster your graphics card, the more like CUDA cores for NVIDIA, you have the more chunks of the render image that it can do. Yeah, V-Ray. For all of them, the V-Ray RT engine is the GPU renderer for still images, for production images. And you can set it up so it's rendering in your viewport, or you can set it up to render out in the viewport. So under the V-Ray options, the last thing is the RT engine, and that enables the real-time engine. And then if you select select the RT mode, you can go to RT GPU. If you have a AMD card, is it AMD or 7? If you have a GeForce or NVIDIA card, you use CUDA, and if you have the other manufacturer, I think it's AMD, right? No, the other manufacturer of graphics cards, you have to use OpenCL. So I selected she has an NVIDIA, so